welcome. I'm Marlon Boarnet. I'm a professor and chair of the Department of Urban Planning and Spatial Analysis here at the USC Price School. And pleased to have all of you joining us for our professional development panel on housing and real estate development. And like the previous panels, we are thrilled to have an accomplished group of professionals, several of whom have ties to USC and USC Price. And let me quickly thank Terrence Rucker, the program specialist for our Executive Master of Urban Planning degree, who has organized this. Let me introduce each panelist briefly and welcome them. And then I will turn the floor over to Valerie Savior, who's the director of our Office of Career Services, who will moderate. And so, Valerie, let me just kind of go through a quick panel name and title introduction. And we're thrilled to have with us Alicia Bramble, who is the asset manager at Brilliant Corners and president of the Los Angeles chapter of African American Real Estate Professionals. George Giaquinto, vice president of development of the Howard Hughes Corporation, and one of three graduates of our Executive Master of Urban Planning degree who are joining us today. Lance Gilliam, partner at Waterman, Steele, and a former commissioner of the Houston Housing Authority, and also an executive degree student. Ted Stinson, managing member of UrbanKNKT in Anchorage, and again, a graduate of our Executive Master of Urban Planning degree. And Brandon McCall, who is with Enterprise Housing Credit Investments and a board member of the Real Estate Executives Forum. And we're just thrilled to have all of them here, exceptional talent. And let me turn the floor over to Valerie Savior, who does fantastic work directing our Price Office of Career Services, to moderate. So,
well, thank you very much, Marlon. And it's my pleasure again to have the privilege to meet these wonderful professionals in an engaging conversation on their career paths on behalf of Price students. I welcome all our panelists as well. And I welcome our students. And just a reminder, some of our panelists are not in Los Angeles, so thank you for joining us in your time zone and for taking the time. If I haven't met you students, as Marlon said, I run the Office of Career Services. We are here to help students determine their career trajectory and be prepared to enter the world of work. I know you know if you're real estate students in our program, you work probably more closely with both Sonia and Russ. But we are excited to have everybody in this conversation today. We're going to spend about the first 20 or 25 minutes having self-introductions from the professionals. Please pick up on themes of their talking points, and you can chat your questions in advance of the time to ask them to either Terrence Rucker or myself. And then we're really going to have the rest of the evening be guided by what's of interest to you. You can raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and go on camera. We encourage you to do so. Introduce yourself and ask a question, or I'll ask a question on your behalf. So without further ado, we're just going to ask you to take about 3 up to 4 minutes each to tell us a little bit about your journey to your current career role and what you actually do in your job, and perhaps a key theme or tip or skill that you think that students need to acquire to thrive if they were to enter your field. And since I know Brandon, because he's very graciously served on panels in my PPD internship class, I hope you don't mind, Brandon. Let's start with you.
Sure, happy to start and happy to meet you all. So again, my name is Brandon McCall. I work in the tax credit underwriting space, and I'm going to give the version that I tell my own family and my wife, because everyone says, what the hell does that mean? So what I do is take money from investors who are usually banks, it can be insurance companies, it could be a range, but taking money from them that they would owe in taxes, we put it into a fund, and then from there we invest it into affordable housing. So affordable housing, let's say a project costs $50 million. We take 20 million from them and then invest it into affordable housing. And then they get money from sources. You probably have heard of Prop HHH, I'm sure you've heard of like state funding. There's all these different sources of funding for affordable housing, but that fills the gap. So what that means for them is that they get a return, but they also get a tax credit. So instead of paying that 20 million in taxes, they've instead invested it. So that win is a win for them, and it's a win for people who need affordable housing. But I do that nationwide. I did not start off actually doing numbers. I actually started off working at the same company, but working with nonprofits. So doing capacity building, grant writing, all those sorts of things. And I led myself through the journey to figure out what is it that will achieve the most impact. And for me, that was the finance side. So I moved to New York after graduating. I went to the Price School, got a master's in public administration, moved to New York after, and worked for a bank and just kind of worked my way up through that. But started as an analyst, learned the numbers, learned how to run models. I would say that I initially thought, oh, this is so hard. How do people do it? Anyone can do it. It's just a lot of time, just, kind of understand. A lot of it's addition and subtraction. So how much does it cost to do a project? Here's how much money you have from these sources. What's the gap? And figuring out how to fill that gap. So that's a lot of what I do. I worked on the debt side. Now I'm on the equity side. And I would say outside of work, I wear a lot of different hats, one of which I'm actually a landlord. I have a property that I own. And dealing with that with COVID is definitely a challenge, I will say. So I get to see the policy side. I get to see all these propositions that are happening right now. I get to see it from that lens. So that's very interesting. I also get to see it from the work lens, which is the finance side. And then I'm on the board of a nonprofit developer, so I get to see it from that side. So I would say housing is dynamic. Now is definitely a good time to be in it. Interest rates are low, I'm sure you've heard, but there's a lot of development going on. Things are changing, and I can speak to where I grew up personally, and the neighborhood I grew up in South Los Angeles is totally different than what it is now. So I will say neighborhoods are changing. It's a really dynamic thing. One thing that drew me to the industry is that I found a lot of things were very conceptual, a lot of topics about change and how do you measure impact. It was really hard for me to wrap my brain around that. And what I liked about housing is that I can go back to what was a vacant lot and now see a building and know that is the impact. So that's what drew me in. It's very tangible, very concrete. There's no question, there's no this is it, there's a building there. So for me, that was the impact. That's what drew me in. I would say in terms of what you can do now, a lot of it's just figuring out what you like and don't like, and then figuring out what value you want to bring to whatever industry you go into. Obviously, I'm going to encourage real estate, but whatever you go into, figuring out what value you want to add and kind of what your niche is, and then get into it. And it takes some time. A lot of it's self-taught, but with time, you definitely can get there. So I think that's about 3 minutes. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Brandon. So many wonderful tidbits that we could pick up on in the Q&A portion. So thank you so much for your self-introduction. Alicia, may you go next for us?
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Terrence. I'm really appreciative that you had me here today. I love talking about my profession and what I do. It's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm always looking, when I'm looking to go to another organization, I'm looking to see that it's very mission-based and mission-driven. And so, as a matter of fact, I worked with Brandon's organization before, Enterprise. And so I am an asset manager. I've been doing asset management for about 10 years, and I've been in real estate for about 15 years. And I started out in property management as a leasing consultant. So I used to show apartments, and I used to be the accountant. So I was counting the money, and I was down and I was doing the boots on the ground work, which I still do till this day. So as an asset manager, I have a triple bottom line that I have to meet, right? So I try to maximize my rent revenue. I try to maximize the return to my stakeholders while also keeping my residents and my community in mind and making sure that I have mission-driven results. As an asset manager over the years, I've managed over 10,000 units, almost $1 billion or over $1 billion AUM assets under management. And I've worked with all of the state, city, local, county jurisdictions that you can think of in New York, Texas, Arizona, California, of course, Washington State. And as an asset manager, you have to know the different nuances and laws within those cities, counties, and within the state tax credit laws, as well as HUD. I'm very familiar with HUD. And so I've worked with enterprise in the past as an asset manager for a nonprofit, a former nonprofit that I worked for. And enterprise is the limited partner. So they're the investors. They're the ones that gave us the money to develop this affordable housing project. And so now it's my job for the next 15 years to make sure that I am meeting that triple bottom line. And so I do financial analysis. I walk properties all the time to make sure that my asset is maintained, so that it maintains value. And so that, again, I'm returning an investment to making a return to my investors. And so throughout my career, I have just learned so many different things. I've worked for a range of nonprofit developers in affordable housing and investors. So I've learned both spectrums of affordable housing, and in particular in asset management. One thing that I would want students to make note of is that you don't have to be just an affordable housing asset manager. I would say every realm of real estate, from retail to industrial to life science, which is, you can only imagine in these COVID-19 times, those are definitely industries that are up and coming. So industrial and life science, and data and life science, I should say, are booming industries in real estate right now, as well as multifamily. And residential is booming right now as well. So how I got to where I am today, I mean, I've worked extremely hard. And again, I'm boots on the ground. And I think that's what a lot of employers are looking for, to couple with your degree. So they want to make sure that you have that experience and that you know those intricacies. I can walk into any state agency, I can walk into any county or city agency, and I can speak the lingo. And I can speak that lingo because I've dealt with those intricacies so much over the years. There's so many other things that I do within my position now. I do risk management, so I handle a lot of insurance claims. I handle a lot of the part of development. So when we're going into a new deal, I have to make sure that deal pencils out. If we're building a property just to build it and it doesn't pencil out over the next 10 to 15 years, I'm the one raising my hand and saying, hey, we need to look at this. And a few helpful hints that help me along the way are the letters behind my name. I have several certifications: a tax credit specialist, a housing compliance certified professional. I have my certified housing asset management certification. I'm also getting my MBA from, I don't know if I should say it on this line, Syracuse University.
Sure.
And so all of those things are making me a really viable candidate in this current climate. I'm also president of African American Real Estate Professionals of Los Angeles. We have now a network of over 500, almost 500 professionals in Los Angeles. We have a range of architects, developers, brokers, some residential, a lot of multifamily now. And it's just a space that we've created to increase diversity within the commercial real estate industry. The commercial real estate industry, as we can see since the events in early 2020, May, they have really changed how everyone's thinking. So AREP LA has really become just a house for people to, almost a refuge for our members. So we do a lot of networking, we do a lot of professional development for our members, and we do a lot of community outreach.
Alicia, thank you so much. That was fantastic. And I love that both of you kind of pointed to hot occupational areas that might be of interest, growing interest for our students. So thank you for that. Moving on, let's go on and move to Lance. I think that would be a nice transition. Welcome, Lance.
I'm Lance Gilliam. I'm down here in Houston, Texas. And it's funny, I love the enthusiasm. I'm actually changed what I was going to say based on what's been said before me. And unlike Marlon gave me too much credit, I will actually graduate from USC with my executive master's in urban planning in December. I took a chance that we would be able to meet in our intensive in December, and that's, of course, not happening. So I've still got a check the box to do. I'm probably one of the older guys on the call. I graduated from SMU in 1977 with a degree in real estate and didn't finish my master's degree back then, so I decided I would do it now. But what started my career is, and this goes to the point of Alicia and Brandon, both numbers, is I was trained as a finance guy, real estate finance guy. My first two bosses were the H and the F and HFF. John Fenolio and Hal Holliday were two guys sitting outside my office who gave me packages to write about a variety of different assets. And they were all market rate assets, apartments, industrial buildings, office buildings, shopping centers. So in a very short period of time as an analyst, I saw a tremendous number of deals and learned how to take the something off paper into a loan package, which meant it could be funded and it could happen and it had to make economic sense. I then spent the next 30 years, actually probably about 35 years of my life, again, like Alicia, getting a whole lot of letters behind my name in the retail development and brokerage community. My career looks like a graveyard of big boxes. Circuit City, Sports Authority, Office Depot. I traveled throughout the entire country. And again, what made the difference for me versus my peers in doing a great job for my clients, I hope, was I understood the numbers. I understood that it didn't matter what we negotiated. If it couldn't be financed and built, then it wasn't going to happen. And I've, through the International Council of Shopping Centers, accumulated all sorts of great letters, which today mean nothing in my career because I really spend very little time in the retail world. I built a company here in Houston that was ultimately, in a series of transactions, sold to CBRE. I had agreed to stay for a couple of years and manage the Houston office of that smaller company, not the CBRE merger. And once that 2 years was up, I left. But where I left to go was really what changed my life and what I do today, and why I'm here today. Is in 2010, our mayor asked that I serve on the Houston Housing Authority's Board of Commissioners. I had no background in affordable housing whatsoever. I was just a finance guy, pretty much a hired gun. I get things done for high net worth families, high net worth companies, public companies. And I ended up as the chairman of the Houston Housing Authority and their board for 6 years. And it was during a time that was very, very contentious in fair housing and other social equitable issues. Went to the Supreme Court, negotiated with two secretaries of HUD, never thought I would be in the room with a guy reporting to the president. And we had great success. But what that led to was, again, today I have a firm. It's about 7 years old, just celebrated its 7th anniversary. It focuses almost exclusively on socially equitable investments. Last year, our firm advised clients, and in some cases, I invested with my clients in creating 3,000 new affordable homes in the city of Houston, about $500 million in transactions. We'll do about the same amount this year. Again, all of that goes back to my knowledge of, and I don't like talking about this, it's funny, but it's my knowledge of the numbers and being able to put numbers in context. And that's why I found the master's program in urban planning to be so interesting to me. Is it's really a merger of planning and development. And my background was in finance and development. My background was not in planning, and it gave me the structure that I needed to be more successful and really to appreciate what others around me do. My firm has a strong community engagement partner. I never really understood her job. After 2 years in the master's program, I still can't do her job as well as she does, but I understand it and I can have a conversation with her about it. But I would tell you that the one guidance I would give you is we get paid about half the time for our work. We charge our big clients enough that it pays us to make up for the times we give our time away. And the time we give away to smaller firms, smaller developers, smaller nonprofits that can't afford us is the greatest happiness we have. And that balance between being happy and being compensated, at this point in my life, I would trade for the happiness. It's more precious to me in terms of compensation. I realize we can't all afford to do that, but do something that makes you happy. If you do something that makes you happy, you will want, and it sounds like BS, but it will make you want to sit here and do it over and over and over again. When I volunteered, I'll finish this up. When I volunteered, I'm chairman of our Coalition for the Homeless. I insist, I just beg our board members, and we go to the streets. We deal with $50 million right now in COVID in terms of supporting the homeless. But we have to remember we're doing it one person at a time. And that happiness and the reward from that of connecting directly to what we're doing, whether it's food access, affordable housing or early learning. It's seeing who we affect that causes us to work so hard to have impacts. And I would just ask you, yeah, pay your dues, but as fast as you can, get to somewhere where you're happy doing what you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much, Lance. That was very inspiring. And it's just fascinating to see how a career forms, starting with the numbers and who you've become and what are your priorities now. I really appreciate you sharing your introduction. So let's move on to George. Welcome, George.
Thank you. And just honored to be on a panel with such talented and great people, and really can't say enough about the Price executive program. It was an amazing program, probably the best experience, one of the best experiences in my life. I am a senior vice president of development for Howard Hughes. I've been in retail for a great portion of my career, retail development, and I'm really into project execution is really what we do. So we essentially herd the cats from design to operations to construction to marketing, et cetera, put all these projects together, look at the feasibility of them, and then execute them. And I've done that for the World Trade Center, for retail programs in airports over the years, now on South Street Seaport, where we've been renovating the Seaport for the 5 years that I've been at Howard Hughes. But really, it's funny, Lance says it started with numbers. My career started with numbers. I came out of university in 1985 with an economics degree, thinking about a career in econometrics. And talking about knowing the numbers, I started with Alan Greenspan's firm, Townsend Greenspan, which in those days, there were multiple econometric forecasting firms that industry used to project their production lines and things like that. And I worked on the automobile and appliance models at Townsend Greenspan, but wanted to get more involved and have more autonomy. There was sort of managing models that obviously you don't really argue with Alan Greenspan about what his models are doing when you're fresh out of school, but. I moved on to a small utility company and was able to set up forecast models that we would take to the public service commissions for rate increases and rate changes and development of new rates. And really, after about 3 or 4 years of that, sitting in a room with no windows and a lot of stacks of computer papers, said, I really want to go somewhere else. And I decided to make a career move to the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey to get into public finance and work on big transportation projects. And somehow through the initial program I was in there, got put into airports and transportation retail and was there for 7 years. And essentially from there, went on to a number of different positions in retail development outside of the Port Authority. But sort of my lesson for my career is that everywhere I've been, every job I've taken after the Port Authority has really come through my relationships with people that I've developed over the years. I worked for Columbia University in their real estate development department, and I was hired by somebody who I worked with in my career at Port Authority. While I was at Columbia, I ran sort of a side consulting business in airport retail, and got to the World Trade Center working for Westfield through people I met in that consulting industry, and then sort of coming back to Howard Hughes, worked for people. Got the job through folks that I worked with at Westfield. So really, it's your relationships in life that you develop, and staying in touch with people throughout your career. The impressions you make on them, understanding the impressions you make is can stick with people. And I've got to say, I've been very fortunate throughout my career to have had those opportunities. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, George. Thank you for driving home the importance of relationship building. And it is a process, yes. So we're going to hear from our finalist colleague on the panel, Ted. But Ted, before you share your background, we're going to launch a little poll now. Terrence is just going to ask you so we can let our panelists know how many of you are in undergraduate education, how many of you have multiple years of world of work experience. So please just complete the poll, and when the results come up, after Ted is shared, I will share the results of the poll. So welcome, Ted. Welcome from Alaska, and we look forward to hearing about your journey right now.
Yeah, well, I'm up in Anchorage, Alaska, and I concur with George. This Executive Masters in Urban Planning program was a real highlight of my life, and I really appreciate it. I'm more on the small business development side of things. I've had about equal experience in residential, light commercial, and industrial. I came to Alaska, and I've got a architectural engineering associate degree that I use in engineering and developing plans. I'm a project management professional and got a certification for that for actual construction execution and or design build execution. I'm working on some concepts right now in Anchorage for real estate development, and that is really piggybacked off of this Executive Masters program, and looking at blended use, looking at planning from a municipality standpoint, what districts, have been created, what are those district plans, what's relative to what products that I want to produce, what are the incentives that are associated with those plans. Is there opportunity for P3 with any kind of blended use development that I might want to be involved in, and working with different planning and zoning assembly members, other administrative officials, community economic development, and those kinds of entities, governmental entities. And also I'm driving around talking to residents. I've got some people involved with me that are also driving around and discussing things with the community. We've had forums with the city and the actual districts to create kind of a consensus on what can really work in an area. And I'm noticing that it's kind of a balancing act. If you have a lot of residents in an area that has too few commercial, then you might want to increase commercial development. Likewise, if you have too much commercial and it looks like that residential development can support more commercial, and also what's the long range plan for those areas and those districts and even corridors, as it were. So we're working specifically with Spinard corridor plan that goes from downtown Anchorage to the airport. It's on kind of a circuitous route that gets from downtown Anchorage to the airport, but you've got lakes and other destination entertainment, things like that are in there, that we're just trying to figure out what development can go where, what can be renovated, what concept, what program can we build, either small or large, or not large, but Anchorage is only 300,000 people, so large is relative. But anyway, I really like this program because it seemed to, from the start of the program to the end of the program, the actual curriculum was in order to where at the end of the day, I'm focused on strategic planning, which was one of our last, I think, plus 671, which is something that matter of fact, I just talked to my daughter in Southern California who wants to develop some social activities down there. She was interested in strategic planning. I'm trying to talk her into going through this program, but regardless, it was a really great program. And my expertise is involved is design and build and development, market analysis, both area-wide, then getting locally into what specifically could work, developing feasibility studies, developing the numbers, the return on investment, and creating a whole financeable feasibility package that is search of equity and debt capital. So that's just kind of a summary of my history.
Wonderful to meet you, Ted. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. This is great. There's so much vast and deep experience on the panel. Thank you for your introductions. There's so many directions we could go. Terrence, do we have the result of the poll? Okay, so tonight we have 13% of our attendees are undergraduates or in a progressive degree program moving straight to a master's degree from their undergraduate degree. 8 have 2 years less experience, and then the rest have 2 to 10. So we have quite a larger number tonight of people with 2 to 5+ years worth of work experience. So thank you, students, and for answering the poll. So that ends the formal questions, and now we have a good half an hour. Maybe we'll go about 5 minutes over because we did start 5 minutes late, if people are amenable to that, to have exciting conversations. So I think there are a couple questions in the queue, so give me a moment. Let's see. Okay, Maria, would you like me to ask this question, or would you like to ask it yourself?
That's fine. You can ask. It's pretty straightforward.
Well, there you are. Go ahead and ask your question. Tell us what you're studying.
Sure. So, hi, first of all, to my former classmates and the executive.
Hey, Maria.
Good to see you guys. I was curious if there is, I was really intrigued by Brandon's background, and I was wondering if there's a site for job seekers if we're interested in the nonprofit housing world.
So I would say if you're based in Southern California, which you are, okay, so SCAMP is what I would recommend. It's Southern California.
Chat, Brandon?
Yeah, it's Southern California Association of Nonprofit Housing. I know that's a lot, but they have a job portal. So if you go on there, it's like all the nonprofit, affordable housing type jobs in Southern California. And then honestly, most cities have a similar organization. Actually, most cities, most states, to be honest. So if you look, no matter where you are, you can kind of find somewhere that has that. I found it in New York. It was NYSAFA. I mean, it's all over. So, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew, our next student has a question he'd like to ask himself. Please unmute and get on camera and introduce yourself and your question.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Andrew Stables. I guess my question kind of starts with a little bit of explanation. Lance, I was really intrigued by your kind of concept of kind of getting to where you love as soon as possible, kind of paying your dues. I worked the last 5 years as a real estate appraiser analyst with a small firm that dealt with kind of interesting, like the intersection between environmental issues and property value. And so I came back after 5 years. I ended up at JLL, and now I'm back in school because I wanted to find a way to kind of take the real estate background I had and move into kind of equitable development, but one that kind of takes into account all the environmental issues and climate resilience issues that we're now having to deal with. And so my 2 questions are as follows for the whole panel. Does the panel have any recommendations on current projects or firms that kind of do housing development and environmental kind of resilience well together? Additionally, what skill sets do you generally see as most important in housing development?
Great, what a great question. Who would like to start us off in a response?
If you want, I can go real quickly. One is an asset class, affordable housing development right now. And you didn't go specifically to affordable, but affordable housing development is a very sustainable asset class. Houston housing market is on the market rate is on a pause, and it's a hard pause between oil prices and other externalities. But the affordable housing market has been sustainable for some time, and there's nothing to suggest that's going to change. If the Democrats win, it probably could get even remarkably good. But even under a Republican administration, it's sustainable. In terms of the merger or the intersection of sustainable development and affordable housing, I can't tell you anybody specifically. There's got to be some folks out there. We do some work with Columbia Residential out of Atlanta. They are very mindful of LEED standards. They develop very, very with a long-term perspective. They're developing in Houston right now. So you're going to be able to find people, but your skill set, I don't know exactly what it is, but coming out of the background as an appraiser, I was trained as an MAI. That's how I got my job working for HF, which, like I said, it was before HFF existed. I was trained and have my MAI, everything except my my submittal for my final exam. And I think your skill set's great for getting into any kind of housing industry and socially equitable investments. It's all numbers.
Perhaps a second professional on the panel with additional suggestions.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Lance's comments that affordable housing is going to be sustainable for the long run. I think in the United States alone, we're short 1.3 million affordable housing units. There are so many high entry barrier markets that people, everyday working people, the working class, lower income to moderate income still cannot afford to live in the places that they work, which is really important to a lot of people. So affordable housing, and now when you do build a new development, you're required to provide 20% of your units as affordable housing. So affordable housing is definitely going to be a sustainable industry. And I'm prime example, I've only thrived in asset management. And so coming from an appraiser, Andrew, I think that you're getting a lot of that valuation background and that modeling background that a lot of will be palatable to a lot of employers. And Brilliant Corners is actually hiring for development associates right now, in case you were interested.
Thank you.
And we're building multifamily, and we specialize in IDD housing, which is intellectual developmentally disabled patients. So we work with the state and we build single family homes, and we renovate them all over the United States. And as far as sustainability, that's when you apply for tax credits, as Brandon was explaining earlier, the more that you promise to the state, the more the higher up your application moves to get those tax credits, right? So sustainability is going to be key moving forward. And like Lance said, no matter what administration wins in this election, affordable housing is one of the topics at hand. And so it will be, it'll gain attention. So, there's a lot around sustainability and energy efficiency right now where you can get in anywhere.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a great question here for Ashley, and I wonder, Brandon, maybe you can start us off. The real estate industry can often seem transactional in its work. How do you pivot to more transformative work that has positive social impact?
Well, I think Brandon has it because he works for an organization that is both. They're very transactional and transformative as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of how to answer that. So
Right.
I started off on the banking side, which is very transactional. Enterprise is in a unique position. So we're a nonprofit, but we do transactions. So what we look at is trying to achieve impact in neighborhoods and nations across the world, or across the country, shall I say. So I would say that what we do is, and I guess I'll give an example, like I did a project in Detroit. We looked at, it was a tower, kind of rehabbing that. One of the things I looked at was how we were doing that, were we doing it equitably? So for example, there was a developer before that wanted to give people these very minimal stipends. It was just a really bad setup. So we were able to come in and say, hey, we're willing to do the project, but you need to be equitable in what you're distributing to people, because what we're doing is looking out for the people, not just the profit. So we're willing to take, and that's something that we do internally, we're willing to take a haircut in what we get to achieve impact. So I would say that there are places like us, we're one of them, but there's tons of others. But there is a way to fuse the two together, or just in general, you can kind of fuse it together in your work. I would say that a lot of people have the numbers side or they have the social side, and it's hard to get the two together. So I would say one thing that this panel has is the two together. So I would say that if you have those two together, where you understand the numbers, where you also understand the social side, you yourself hold a unique seat in that, yes, you get the numbers, yes, you get the transaction in whatever way you approach it, but you also see the social impact and you're able to advocate for that in your seat. So I would say that that's something kind of we all bring that I think you'll be able to bring.
Great.
And I just want to, sorry.
Who is that?
This was George. I'm sorry.
George,
now I was just going to pick up on something Alicia said, because I thought she was, spot on. I think, affordable housing is really where it's at. And I not only beyond that, but I think, higher density housing is where the industry is moving as well. I mean, I think the single family homes market, while, it'll have its play over the next couple of years, I think people are going to move to higher density housing because it's really it's another way of getting to affordable housing. As folks are aging, part of the population is aging. They'd like to stay in their homes, but they can't really afford to, but they want to stay in their towns. And also these towns are struggling with, I'm in a state in New Jersey where essentially the towns live off of real estate taxes, right? And people can't afford to pay their real estate taxes, but conversely, the towns can't keep raising real estate taxes either. They need higher density housing to really support their town and to maintain their town. So I think the world is moving towards, while real estate will always be transactional, the world is moving towards higher density and affordable housing and sustainability. And I think if you look hard enough, you'll find the leaders now, and I think Brandon was correct too. There's plenty of them out there. You'll find the leaders now because the guys who are successful, the entities and companies that are successful in that are out there today, and they're doing good projects otherwise, and they're going to be the leaders, I think, in the future. So I don't have any specific examples. I just graduated from this program and I'm starting on my look as well, but I'm happy to connect with people as I start doing my research.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone have a next question? Okay, Carly, I'll read the question. Carly Rodriguez asks, how do you think about gentrification and displacement in your work? What would you say to those housing rights activists that say housing cannot be affordable and a good investment? So, Terrence, if you have the ability to post this question to everyone, that would probably be helpful. How do you think about gentrification and displacement in your work? And what would you say to those housing rights activists that say housing cannot be affordable and a good investment? Anyone want to tackle that?
Let me answer real quickly as to the second question. That's not true. Is my whole daily existence, including today, is based on sustainably and profitably supporting our clients with developing affordable housing. It's more difficult to develop deeply affordable housing than it is workforce housing, and affordable means a lot, but it absolutely is economically sustainable given the tools we have today. So you're welcome to reach out to me offline and I can show you math, but it works. The gentrification and displacement is oddly a funny question because we're dealing with that right now. And Marla may get mad at me, but go check out urbandisplacement.org. There is a project at UC Berkeley right now called the Urban Displacement Project. And it's fascinating because it's one of the things we're talking about is the right to remain or the right to return in terms of gentrifying communities, and particularly in Houston, where we have a major interstate expansion, wiping out a community asset, a public housing project that's frankly an awful project. But as we've literally had to fight to let that that community be replaced within the community that it's in, because that community is gentrified. And now suddenly the new arrivals don't want the folks who lived there for generations to have the right to return. But there's a ton of data on that right now. And again, you're welcome to reach out to me. But yeah, check out urbandisplacement.org for UC Berkeley. They have some great data on that.
So in one of the videos that we saw with Olson Corporation in LA, they had a strategy of developing single family projects that had an affordability component to it. And it was, a market driven development. And they found that the affordable people who had the affordable housing were more likely to maintain their homes at a higher level than those that were market rate. And not only that, they found that it was a good profit model with providing affordable housing at a certain percentage for the whole development. So that was striking to me from the lessons that we learned.
Thank you. Was someone else trying to jump in before I?
I was just going to jump in, and one of the New York is one of those cities where I think gentrification has really ripped the heart out of the city in a lot of ways. But really, to start combating that, city planning began to do rezoning exercises by bringing the community leaders in certain neighborhoods. And community participants and really just anybody, activists, anyone who was interested, and tried to develop redistricting and rezoning plans for neighborhoods that sort of worked on transportation, the type of retail they wanted, the type of housing they needed, and districting and redistricting in that way to combat gentrification. It's tough in New York because the landowners are looking to profit from their real estate. And once the neighborhood becomes a nice place to live in New York, given the affordability of housing here, it's tough to stop it from ratcheting up because of the demand. But, interestingly enough, COVID has had an interesting effect on that in New York. And for once, rents have dropped. But I think if you look at that as sort of approach, and I'm happy to share, I'll pull up a website and put it in the chat. You could look at how city planning is trying to combat gentrification in New York.
Great, thanks, George. Excuse me for interrupting. I'm just going to do a little time check now. We do have quite a few more questions. It may not be feasible to get to all of them. It's 4:51 and I'd like to end at about 5:05. Are you panelists okay if I move on to the next question, or does someone have a pressing need to respond to this issue of displacement?
I just want to say really, really quick, 15 seconds or less. The reason we're doing this or having this conversation is because government policies created segregated communities. And I just want to call that out explicitly. And to me, there's nothing wrong with people moving in and bringing investment into communities. No one benefits from living in concentrated areas of poverty. The challenge is how to do it equitably. So I just want to call that out. The reason we're having this conversation is because of government policies that created these neighborhoods. So I'll stop there.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Maisha, I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, Miss Taylor. Why don't you introduce yourself with your question?
Hi, I'm Alicia Tyler. I'm actually going to be a soon-to-be graduate of the EMAP program. It's been absolutely wonderful, and I've learned so much. Really excited to apply it in my I guess in the planning field, which I'm transitioning from real estate into. My question is basically on retail, specifically vacant retail. We're going through obviously a huge transition due to COVID, and prior to that, retail was not doing so well in terms of brick and mortar anyway. But I was just wondering, in terms of, do you see long-term patterns where retail is transitioning into housing or mixed use development?
And you mentioned a specific curiosity about dead malls. So who would like to talk about repurposing vacant retail to housing?
I mean, it's going to happen. It's already happening. A lot of different realms of real estate, like even hotels, are being transformed into housing. But I think it's going to take a while for us to see the results, because developers and investors are still playing around with the model and seeing what's going to happen and how it can happen, and rezoning laws and things like that. But I think that retail is going to stay at a steady pace just for a little while until we really see what the effects of COVID-19 are, and then we'll see what those real results are. But right now, it's still a new experiment. I should say, in that some people are definitely exploring those options.
Yeah, the other issue in that too is it depends if you're talking about repurposing or redeveloping a site that was formerly retail with a more dense use, so demolishing the retail and starting over. Repurposing retail buildings for housing is one of those things that's more often than not easier. It's cheaper and more efficient and better, all those great words, just to go ahead and tear it down and start over. And most retail, big boxes in particular, weren't developed particularly densely. That's not been a trend for that many years. So we're not really seeing buildings being repurposed. We're seeing sites being redeveloped.
Thank you. I'm going to go on and ask Jose to, if you would introduce yourself and ask your question about resources, because a lot of people have pointed to the importance of crunching numbers and understanding numbers. And then Terrence, if you have a moment, could you send Ruby's question to George? And if we have time, there's a question particularly for you, George, from Ruby. But Jose?
Yeah, hi, everyone. My name is Jose. I'm currently an MPA student. So this is actually my last semester at USC in the MPA program. And I'm particularly interested in finding out, where I can start maybe building some skills regarding learning financial models, or, like Brandon and others mentioned, learning the numbers.
I mean, it depends on what you want to do. I know I don't know fund modeling, but I do know how to crunch my numbers. As an asset manager, I have to be able to run those numbers. I have to be able to analyze my trends, but more importantly, I have to develop and implement a plan to turn those numbers around. And so that becomes important in my industry, not just running numbers. And a lot of previous employers have learned that numbers can tell you so much information, but you have to be able to work with them after. So I think that fund modeling is extremely, it's rare. And so I think it's a great skill to have. And maybe working for an investor is where I've seen most of modeling skills and fund modeling skills, and even a developer.
Great, thank you. Anyone else with suggestions on how to build out those skills?
Marlon, you should be able to answer that through one of y'all's classes at USC.
I was going to say I didn't want to do a commercial for USC, but the first course you take in the program we took it with Professor Copeman. Taught a lot of folks who didn't really know about how to look at a development model. Just enough skills to get through the analysis. Yeah.
So let me real quickly, we've got students from a lot of different programs. So depending on what program you're in, what level you're at, master's, undergrad, I think the better advice, reach out to your program administrator and ask them, is there and maybe even say, hey, I was on this session. Is there a good class to have me learn real estate development models, and ask them to double back to me? Because the answer for a student will depend a little bit on what program they're in. We're happy to help. We have different classes we could point you to. Get a little offline.
So, George, I don't know if you've had a moment to receive that question from Ruby, and maybe you can chat her a response because it's particular to you. Is there anyone who would like to ask a question that 3 or 4 of the panelists could answer to wrap us up? And then I'll turn it over to Marlon.
If you don't mind me asking a second question, I can just follow up on some of the comments. So I am in Kansas City, Missouri. So I just wanted to kind of put out the perspective of, being kind of in the middle of the country. I know, Lance, you're down in Houston, and like how that differs in terms of nonprofits. I know here, I really struggle to find nonprofit developers. There's a couple out there, but we do not have the capacity at all for it. And I've been struggling with that for years, and have even considered, like, maybe, though this is my hometown, maybe this isn't the place for me to continue to excel in my career if I can't find those avenues. So I'm just curious if you all have looked at sort of smaller cities or cities outside of where you are, and how the capacity could be built in those areas.
Great question.
One of the things you may want to think about is and there's actually the nonprofit developers. I wouldn't limit yourself to nonprofit developers. There's a lot of for-profit developers that engage socially equitable values like Columbia Residential, like McCormick Barron. And you may want to think about as they project their capabilities. We have a number of people who aren't based here but are very active here, and they're hiring project managers here. They need regional offices because their level of investment is relatively intense. But I wouldn't limit yourself to nonprofits. Most of the nonprofit guys operate as if they were for-profit developers. They're simply just reinvesting their profits back into, again, mission.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. I think it depends on your market. I've done deals in Texas, Michigan, all over, and everywhere is different. The deals in Texas, a lot of for-profit, still the same mission, still doing the same thing. So it's not a big difference. So be open, I would say, to different niches of how to get the work done. So I'd focus more on the work and not necessarily for-profit or not.
And you can also go to the community and economic development within those smaller municipalities, and they have programs for those nonprofit developers. That seems to be working in Anchorage, and so I would look out for that.
Thank you. Well, we're just about at time. I learned so much today from this great group of professionals. Lance, you've already said, ping me if you want to reach out. I know our students would love to follow up with you. So Terrence will be sending you an email and finding out what's the best way that students can be in touch for a coffee chat if you're amenable. I want to thank all of you, and I really want to thank the students for such insightful questions for this conversation today. And I'm going to turn it over to Marlon.
All right, thank you. Valerie, thank you, and everyone on the panel, thank you. And let me thank all of you out there in the audience, a wonderful set of questions. And so a really, really good discussion. So let me just highlight also, I would encourage all of you who are students, and I know some of the names, so I know that you are in differing degree programs, from our undergraduate to our on-campus masters to our executive masters. And I'd encourage all of you to even take initiative and reach out to panelists as you are able to find them and connect to them. And I'm sure they would be very open to, talking with you. Thank you so much. This is the 6th of these professional development panels that we offered this semester. And while we had originally planned 8, we are taking numbers 7 and 8 and moving those into the spring. It is getting well into the latter part of the semester. And I know that students are feeling busy. And so we are going to take a rest break, and we will come back in spring semester. So to students, keep an eye out. We'll be back kind of probably starting up ballpark late January. And to our panelists, thanks so much. We will stay in touch, and quite possibly if I could ask the panel to maybe just kind of hang on afterwards. So we can
so this concludes our wonderful discussion in careers in housing and real estate. If the professionals can just stay on for a minute. Students, thank you for joining the discussion. Please go ahead and sign off, and please prioritize getting in touch with these individuals. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Lance. Thank you, Alicia, Ted, and George.